Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by Onyx Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is Onyx Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, Onyx Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust Onyx Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about Onyx, go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle this coming year, look no further than a Kelbley's rifle. I've been rocking their Coda rifle for the last couple seasons, and I've had great success with it. It's an amazing shooter, and every time I put one of their rifles in somebody's hands, they're like, oh, I got to get one of these. Kelbley's holds over 92 world and national records that are either broken or set on one of their actions or rifles. So they really set a higher level of accuracy. If you want to know more about Kelbley's rifles, go to kelbley.com. That's KELBLY.com. Tell them Johnny Mack sent you with Soul Seekers, and go enjoy shooting that much more in this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. Go check out Kelbley Rifles. All right, guys, if you have never upgraded your trigger on your hunting or shooting rifle, it is time that you do. And when you do, I want you to take a look at Timney triggers. Built by hand in the USA since 1946, and every expert recognizes the importance of their trigger. Timney makes the world's finest trigger, and you gotta love it because they are built in the USA. For those of you who are lever action fans, Timney just released their first lever action trigger. You're going to want to go check that out. We talk about that on episode 290 of the podcast. But if you are looking for triggers for whether it's a handgun, rifle, or anything else, go check out timneytriggers.com and go become a better, more accurate, more deadly shooter because it starts at your fingertips. Be blessed. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today's episode is for all of you who have ever felt like you have imposter syndrome. Like you don't really know what's going on, but you need to pretend like you know what's happening at all times. Or for those of you who are like, where do I start? Today's episode was with the host of the First Generation Bowhunter podcast, Adam Buchanan. He is one heck of a cool dude, also works within the hunting world for Black Ovis and Camo Fire, and we're going to dive into his story, his adventures, and so much more. So without further ado, Adam, my man, how are you doing, brother?
Doing good. Yeah, great work on this podcast. Love what you're doing. And I'm, shot my biggest buck and just a few weeks ago, and it's totally awesome and feeling great. So I am just happy as a clam. I've got my big 3x4 buck that I shot a few weeks ago, and I'm good, man. I'm having a great hunting season.
Oh, I love that. You know, I also just shot my largest buck about a week ago, a little over a week ago, ever.
No way.
Yeah, an 8-point whitetail. Just, just killing the game.
Oh yeah. No, I love it. It's good. And it's funny because I was such a freezer filler for so long. So it's a little backwards for me to be like, oh, my biggest buck ever. But like there was probably 7 does that led up to where I am now. So we can dive in more later, but it's exciting. Yeah. It's nothing like it,
Well, I'll tell you a little side story. I'm here we go. I'm going to adjust the camera. So this buck right up here on my wall is my very first branch antlered buck. And I shot that in the state of Texas or state of Washington. That deer isn't even legal for Texas.
Oh my gosh.
So it's really funny. I want to hear about the story. So tell us about this biggest buck ever that you just shot.
Yeah, it was so I work in the hunting industry and I'm with one of my coworkers. We're a two-man team there in the marketing department. So myself and Craig, I'm like, we got to get out there. It's getting colder and this cold spell just totally hit overnight and we've had record heat in October in Utah. It has been so hot, like 80s, like as a high in the
Oh,
middle of the day. It's why I mean it's not ideal. And we have a long hunting season, which we're fortunate to have,
hmm,
but everyone's just like itchy, like, oh, I got to get out there. But it's, 75 degrees at 7 in the morning.
yeah,
Like nothing's on their feet.
yeah.
And so Craig and myself, we go out and I'm like, let's just go get some fresh content. We'll go kind of shoot a few, pieces that we've done. And I made the joke. I'm like, oh, we've got these new game bags we got to focus on. It would be really nice to get an animal on the ground so we could do a game bag photo shoot. I mean, this is the kind of crap you hear in the hunting industry. Like the stuff you say, like, let's go shoot something so we can, take photos of it for, the next ad campaign.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we hop on the bikes. We e-bike a lot here. They're legal for now. And get up and seriously, we're just kind of motoring along and we're kind of looking for elk mostly. I was kind of on elk brain
Hmm.
and I look up the hill, big steep hill, and there's like 8 deer. And I'm like, holy, like, I don't know about you, but like when I see deer within range like that, do you still feel it like the zing?
Yes, I actually was talking to my wife about this just the other night when we were taking a walk, and I go, I just realized why I love hunting so much once I got back into the blind or actually started deer hunting again because the very first deer that I saw, my heart rate just went "Buh, buh, 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 buh," and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh," and I have not felt that since last year. So
Hmm.
yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I hope that never goes away. I
Yeah.
don't think it ever will. It's I do ice baths a lot and everyone's like, "Oh, do you ever get used to it?" I'm like, "No. You don't want to get used to it."
Mm.
Like if I ever get used to an ice bath, there's something wrong with me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that to me is hunting. So I mean, I'm like, you know, and I see 4 does and 4 bucks, 3x4, which I shot, 2x2s, and like this forky. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, I gotta get the big one. Like, I gotta get the big one. I've been doing this so long and I've failed so many times and I've shot so many does, and that's been great. Like, I love cooking the meat. I'm all about it. And literally have my freezer 10 feet behind me. And I was just like, I wanna shoot that one.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
Craig kind of stops. I'm kind of like, dude, hey, telling him to stop. And he turns around, he's like, "You wanna take a shot?" I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, it's kinda like when your dad's like, "Do you want a pocket knife?" And you're like, "Yeah, I want." Like it was this funny, and me and Craig, we've hunted quite a bit together and just have these funny experiences. And he's just such a good dude. And so I take my pack off. My bow is attached to my backpack. And when you e-bike, that's pretty common. And so I drop my bow on the ground and I
Ooh.
smash all the knocks, like all of them just pinched. And I'm just like, oh, like biggest buck. And the deer are probably 45 yards away. They're seeing us. They're kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
And I just look down and I see all these pinched knocks. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like just the breath knocked out of me. And so I'm fiddling with them and trying to and this is where your brain just shuts off,
Mm.
is I pulled an arrow out with a smash knock. I start unwinding the broadhead to put it on an arrow with a working knock. Now think about that for a second. Every arrow in my quiver
Had a
has a
broadhead.
broadhead on it. But in my broken brain, I'm like, I have to take a good broadhead off a bad arrow. And I mean, yeah, these are
Yeah.
the dumb things. And something clicked in me and it was like, you're good. Just grab an arrow that doesn't have a smash knock. And I had like 2 of them. Anyway, so I had a Sever broadhead, phenomenal broadhead, lots of good things to say about them. And I pull my bow up and one of my arrows slips out of my quiver.
Oh.
Just like slips out. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm like the bad news bears. Like, I, oh my, and I'm just so embarrassed. And so finally I'm like, okay, I'm good. And I think I let it fall to the ground. And these deer, I mean, they're having like a tea party up there. Like, I am, I am taking my time. It was so bad. And so I get up and I've got that little QAD rest with the thumb
Yep.
thing, and I push the button, and the rest goes up and smack right back down. Won't stay up.
Oh no.
It's never happened. I've never had this happen before.
I got a
And
story
I'm
about
like,
that also.
oh, like gut wrenching, right? And I'm just like, dude, this is in the bag. Anyway, I flick it over and over. Must have been 20 times. I mean, it was, and I look over at Craig, I'm like, and he's like, and he worked at Easton for like 8 years. And it's just, we're both like dumbfounded, right, by this equipment failure. And so I finally just baby that thing. I'm like, come on, buddy. I just need one shot. Just give me one shot. And I'm just like, click. And then all of a sudden I told myself, I'm like, you got to calm down. You're about to kill a deer. You got to calm down.
Yeah.
And I just zeroed in. I was like, no more screwing around. The arrows are fine, everything. So I took that shot and it was up at like 67 yards. He moved just a little bit and I would call it a clean 70. And dude, I hit that thing right through the heart. It went, gosh, it didn't go, probably went 80 yards. It was down in 2 minutes. It was like perfect shot. It was so, and that's what I love is like when I first see the animal and when I do the blood trail. Those are my two favorite
Yes.
little inner moments of a hunt. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
So
When you're like, okay, I know I shot one. Where is it? Is it actually,
yeah,
did I actually kill it? Am I a hunter now rather than just an observer of nature?
yeah,
Like I'm a participant. Like, yes,
yes.
that gets me going.
So after the arrow release, Craig's like, you hit it, you hit it. And he did the big donkey kick, like folded in half up in the air. And I'm like, oh, because that's the hard part as a bow hunter is like, did I hit it? I mean, everyone's just like, you got the cameras, and I know the whitetail guys, like they got cameras up in the stands and they're like replaying footage and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, Western hunting, you're just like, I'm not running, like, I'm not, and so you just kind of hope, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you hit it, you hit it. And I was like, holy cow. And I just laid down on the ground and just felt sick. Like that adrenaline rush was so intense. I like fell down. It was wild. I'd never had that happen before.
Epic.
It was so good. It
Epic.
was so fun. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, that was so fun. You know what I mean? Like that to me is bow hunting is like, and I just looked at him like, I did it. It's so fun. Like that's what keeps me going.
Yes. Yes, dude. You telling the story. So I started my journey as a Western hunter. I grew up in the
Yeah.
state of Washington. I've never killed a mule deer. I've mule deer hunted a couple times in the state of Washington. It always had to be 3-point or bigger, and I'd always find forks, and I'm like, give me an eyebrow, or give me something, an eye guard that, like, give me a third point.
Mm-hmm.
But coming down here in the whitetail woods, I'm like, dude, those deer would not be having a tea party. Like you can get away with with so much with mule deer. They'll just stand there and stare at you and be like, "What is that guy doing down there? Does he want
Right.
to? He's trying to kill me? No."
Is that a Hoyt? Is that a yeah.
Right? They're judging you on your gear that you bring.
They're like, oh, that must be one of those QAD rests. Oh, yeah, those fail all the time. Get a ham ski, freak.
Oh my gosh, dude!
Yeah,
Let me tell you. And just so that we can share in the highs and lows of stuff,
yeah.
my archery season, which I just got done saying, I also shot my largest buck to date, was my very first archery buck ever, just
Oh,
a little over a
huge.
week ago. And this summer, I played college football. I was a quarterback, and I made it all the way through college sports. But then in flag football, I tore my rotator cuff. you know, like old man league, like So I had
Oh,
to have surgery. Well, then I got into bow hunting. So I always had to draw my bow a little bit differently. And this last year was my first year living in Texas and hunting Texas whitetail. And I didn't realize how drawing a bow out of a chair is so much different on the strength it
Oh,
takes. So I remember seeing a deer and and like getting stuck halfway in my draw while this deer's staring at my blind. And I'm like,
oh,
whatever I could do to get it back. So the summer I practiced and I practiced, and I decided I was going to draw my bow in a different manner to see if that would affect what it would be like shooting out of a chair. And I hurt my shoulder, and that was in the month of August. And I'm like, "Fuck, got it!"
oh,
Like it was hanging. I went to orthopedist. He's like, I can't tell you it's for certain torn again, but you've torn it once, and I'm pretty sure it's torn. And I'm like,
oh,
okay, I'm not. I can do a bite tab if I need to. I can go down this road, um, but no, I'm gonna just heal and take care of my body and just
mm,
be diligent. And so I was able to actually just get my arms strong enough. I can't like throw a ball or shoot a basketball right now. That type of movements really hurt, but
yeah,
I can draw my bow. And so season is approaching. It's the last weekend of September when archery deer season kicks off here in Texas. And on Wednesday, I go to shoot my bow, making sure I get my daily reps in,
mm-hmm.
and my QAD Ultra Rest broke. And
No way.
I've had that thing since I got my bow, never had any issues. Literally shot it the day before, nothing. I go to flick it, and it goes, and then it stayed up. And I was like, no,
Oh
I
no.
gotta retune my bow. How do I get a new archery rest? So I was overcoming just all these obstacles.
Oh my
Turns
god.
out QAD has a lifetime warranty, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that until I had to do my research. So went and bought a new rest, sent mine back. They ended up fixing it, sending it back. I got my bow tuned. Like I was trying to squeeze out of work to go to the bow shop, and
Oh my gosh,
you know the hassle and the hustle at the same time. The H's.
dude.
Um, so no less than getting that fixed, and then I'm like, all right, I'm dialed in. I'm ready to hunt, and I do 8 sits, and I don't see a single deer that comes in within archery range that I felt like was worth sending an arrow at. I was like,
Yeah.
I could shoot that one at 80, 90,
Yeah.
but it's a doe, and I got a long season. There's no reason to, wait till they come in closer. So I overcame all that, and just this last Friday, my wife was like, "Hey, you want to go hunting tonight in the morning while we're getting ready for work?" Because that's how whitetail hunting works. You just go out for a couple hours in the evening or the morning,
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, you're the best." She goes, "Yeah,
You're the best.
drop the kids off at my work once you get them from school, and then head out." Well, freaking rattled in this buck. First time ever rattling with these antlers right here that I found on my lease. Very like all these things are brand new
Oh my
experiences.
gosh.
I just got done doing a Whitetail 101 episode with a guy who killed a monster record buck, and just like thinking of all the scenarios. And then I remember, hey, whitetails jump strings. They've been
Oh,
known to duck. And so what you were talking about is blood trailing and like that excitement. And so I'm also filming this for an episode of Soul Seekers. And so, I'm solo in a blind on a ground, not in a tree. I got
jeez.
I got two different angles where these deer could come from, and so I have to set my camera where I can see. But once I got the deer coming close enough to me, it went out of sight and snuck back in on me, and I couldn't move the camera to readjust it. So I'm at full draw at 30 yards on this buck, and it looks right at me broadside, and I'm like,
Oh,
oh yeah, boom, send it. I hear a whack, and the deer straight drops to the ground.
what?
Yes, I'm like, well, that was unexpected. I'm like, what?
No way.
Well, I haven't shared the story with anyone yet, so this is the first time I'm actually talking about this. Yeah, it just
Whoa.
drops to the ground, and I'm like, I look at my arrows. I'm like, what am I shooting missiles? What just happened? There's
Yeah.
no way I heart shot this deer and it just drops to the ground. So all of a sudden, I'm like, I grab the camera and I'm shaking it around, like filming it.
Yeah.
Like, did I get it? Did I get it? And it rears up. And I'm like, uh-oh. And I quickly grab another arrow and I go and I shoot and I double lung it and it dies right there. It literally died in the place where my blind was last year. It was insane. So I didn't have to blood trail this or anything.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what happened to this first shot? I spined it and I'm like, I'm a way better shot than that. First off, I would
Oh.
not expect to spine a deer. What happened is these pop-up blinds, you have a window that goes up and a window that goes down. Well, I raised the window up, but I didn't lower the bottom window. And
Oh.
so my arrow, I shot the 1 inch below the bottom of the window. So it made a loud pop beyond just the sound of my bow and the string. And so that sucker really ducked. And I'm just grateful that I actually was able to kill the deer and
Wow.
dropped it right there. I'll have to send you a picture of the arrow broke off in its spine. I was like, this is insane. Yeah, I was cutting
That
its
is
back straps out and I was like,
crazy.
no way. So,
That's unreal.
it,
Yes.
I mean, talk about first generation bow hunters. We're just, and this we talked about this off air before we started. Is this whole idea of are we a fraud? Are we faking it
Yeah.
so much for people that listen to our content or tune into our episodes, or is it just like we just are courageous enough to share our experiences and yet at the same time humble enough to know that we don't know it all and we'd love to sit down with people and get their insight.
Yeah, like, I just love embracing that, and I think that's what helps me kinda keep level and not, like, ahead of myself. I got an amazing photo the other day from my buddy in Kansas, and he's a dentist, and he's up in a tree stand in his scrubs, and he
Sweet.
texts me and he says, "Made it all the way, got here, whatever, totally forgot my hunting camo back at home." And he's like,
But he
"I'm
brought
not
it
gonna."
but he brought his scrubs?
But he came from work and
Oh, gotcha.
and, for an evening sit, and he's like, "Well, I'm not gonna waste a good evening to go sit in my tree vine." And I just was like, "That's what it is, man."
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what it's all about,
Yep.
And, if we're taking ourselves too serious,
Oh
there's
yeah.
hunters for that, and there's a community, right, of
Mhm.
of those. But I'm just having way too much fun, and I still get excited, just like when I shot that first doe with a bow many many years ago. And the next week, I sold all my rifle stuff because I was like, dude, I'm going all in on bow. I'm gonna go upgrade my bow, and just that's where it started for me, and it still like has that for me, that excitement. So it's great, man. I love hearing stories like that.
Dude, well, you're inspiring me. I'm a huge fan and believer that inspired people inspire people, right?
Oh,
When you live an inspired life, it naturally resonates and shines for other people to see that and be like, oh, like a mosquito coming to a bug zapper, like, oh, I need some of that. Zzz, oh yeah, and you just get
yeah.
electrified with the goodness. Um,
I get that sometimes because my wife and I, we bop around different hobbies, and we
mhm.
have for many years. We started beekeeping out of nowhere.
Oh, sweet.
We restored vintage campers and trailers for a few years. We, bought a motorhome and rented it for 3 years and took our kids on cool road trips. Never set foot in a motorhome, never, until the day I bought one, and I was like, oh, sign the paperwork, like never had set foot in a motorhome. Like we just kind of go and we're just like, we'll figure it out. We'll work it out.
Yeah.
My latest ridiculousness is I sold my F-150 truck and have since gone full electric. I'm in a Tesla now.
Ooh.
And you have to watch my Instagram video of me putting my full pack of my deer
Yep.
and the antlers, squeezing it into the trunk of a Tesla, and my e-bike is already in there, and then I'm like putting my bow in my front seat, like total g- total dork. I'm total dork, but I just love it, man. It's like, what's next? You
Dude,
just stay curious.
oh, I love it. Well, what's funny is it says a lot about you as a character, yeah, you as a person. and your character is the fact that you are courageous enough to experience life without worrying about failure. And fear of failure is what holds so many people back in this world, and that
Hmm.
was me for the longest time. I was just telling one of my buddies, actually, this was today. I was having a conversation with him. We were talking about how we used to live together after college and how I was dating some girl that I really regretted. And I go, but I was a coward. I was too coward to actually break up with her, like, and that fear of going through difficult times or the fear of the unknown is what held me back so much in my life. And that's
Hmm.
what really transformed my life is when I chose to be a hunter. When I said, I don't know what I'm doing. No one's ever taught me. No one's ever said, hey, do you want to go through this process? No one ever taught me firearm safety, any of that. But I had this call in my heart and my soul to say, I want a better life. And if it's meant to be, it's going to be up to me. And I choose my life right here, right now. And so at the age of 30, I took my hunter safety course, and the rest is history. I mean,
Yeah.
totally transformation. And it all started with that ability to be like, you know what? Send it.
Yeah.
Send it, baby.
Yeah. That is so great to hear. Yeah, I kind of have a similar one. My dad was a big hunter growing up and never really passed anything down.
Mm,
Honestly, there was nothing really passed down, and I was just like, okay. And he'd go, and I think I went one night to a big walk-in freezer and saw an elk he had shot, and it was very disjointed. It was like I was there, but I was like total observer. Nothing was explained. And he took me on my first hunt when I was 27,
mm.
and he was like, "Hey, we're gonna go shoot an elk, and these guys are gonna take us, and we're just gonna drive around." And drove around all day, walked around in 3 feet of snow in New Mexico, and I was just like, "This is stupid. Like,
Yeah.
where are these dumb animals?" Like, and it's just like I was thinking about it more like, I don't know, going skiing and being like, "Are the lifts running? Great, let's get on the lift. Hey, why aren't the lifts running? Well, I guess we're not going skiing." Like, it was very much like, there's a mechanical failure. Why are we out here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And about 10, 20 minutes before like legal shooting light, we found some. He's like, "Okay, line up." And I'm like, "Okay." And I just start pong, pong, I have no idea how to line this thing up. I'm thinking Elmer Fudd, line up the crosshairs and just put it on the animal. And of course, had no clue of a 400-yard shot that you've got to arc it and compensate. None of that. I
Yeah.
mean, and of course, I unload all these. And then the other problem was my adrenaline was going so fast. I just started pulling the bolt. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, yeah. But
You're just cycling rounds, and they're just falling on the ground. You're
yes.
not even pulling the I mean, just total brain melt. And just had no time at the range, no nothing. And anyway, that was like my first like hunting experience. I was like, cool, all right, cool, dad. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
You don't, you're funny. Anyway, like we don't have to talk about that right now.
No, yeah. That was like not hunting in my, I don't know. It was just so, it's like another lifetime. You know what I mean? And then like
Yes.
you enter in like bow hunting. And I think what's interesting for me is like I really got to choose my hunting path, and it wasn't like chosen for me.
Mm,
Like, hey, we wear this and then we get up at this time and that and whatever. It was me getting up and being like, well, I'm gonna sleep in and I'm gonna get to the trail head at 8 a.m.
mm.
I did that one time, honestly, and I shot a deer at like 9:30, and I hear all these guys like getting up at 4:30
And
and
you
blah blah
got great
blah.
sleep.
Yeah, and I'm like, loving sleeping in my own bed and all this stuff. And it's just funny when you get to choose your own hunting path, and it's not like so laid out, like, well, grandpapa used to blah blah blah. And it's like, I didn't have that,
Yeah.
so I'm out there, and you make a lot more mistakes and you
Mm,
don't shoot anything for a long time, but it's my journey, and I have it from head to toe,
yeah.
and so it works, and I can pass things along now to my kids and all that good
Well,
stuff.
it's so interesting. Legacy, this concept of legacy is so important and impactful uh, in society, right? Like, what are you going to leave for the next generation, or what are you going to be known for, or
Yeah.
like what's the purpose of life, or all these different ways to look at legacy, that it's really fun to start your own legacy. Like, no, it's the line starts here and
Yeah.
then it can go wherever it wants. Um, because I'm a father of 3 kids in that exact same time that I chose to start hunting. It's so fascinating. I love hearing your perspective. So let's back up for a second, real quick.
Yeah.
So you went on this very first elk hunt. How old were you? And then at what point did you say, you know what? I actually want to become a hunter?
Yeah. I've never been asked that before, because they truly are so disjointed. Um, I don't think I was 27. I think I was earlier. I think I was 25. I was a new dad. I think we had 2 kids at the time. And I just remember feeling very inconvenienced, and it was around Christmas time, and I was just like, "Oh, I guess I'll go." And it was just so not there. I was living in Portland. Yeah, I was just starting at Columbia Sportswear. And so I was wrapping up my time there. I was about 28, 29, and I got a job at Cabela's. And so we were going to leave Portland and move to Denver and work out of there, not Sydney, out of a digital office in Denver. And I was like, man, here I get this job and they're all hunters. I mean, I can
Yeah.
feel it. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, and I just remember thinking, I got to get a bow. Like, I need a weapon. I got to get a bow. And I was so drawn to bows. And I I share this pretty openly. People are like, "Oh, how'd you get into bow hunting? What's your story?" I'm like, Disney movies. Sorry. Like, it was a big, like, Disney movies were all the rage with bows.
Yeah.
You had Merida and Brave. Hunger Games is not Disney, but Hunger Games was all the rage at that time.
Yeah.
Um, when I was at Cabela's, we actually shot like a fake Hunger Games video for a bow launch. It was a lot of fun. And it's just like media had embraced the bow. It was huge.
Mm.
Arrow had come out. And I mean, it was just anywhere you looked. And so I was just kind of drawn to it. I was like, yeah. And then I go to my backyard and I fling an arrow and I'm like, whoa, you feel like you're holding the earth in the palm of your hand when you shoot a bow. I mean, it's just like, oh yeah, like that is the nectar of life, because there's just so much power. And I know guns are different and they have a lot more power in maybe some ways or whatever, but man, when you like release an arrow, it's pretty fantastic. So yeah, it was probably a 4 to 5 year gap, but it felt like 20 years,
Hmm.
that gap of time.
You know, y- you talking about this whole idea of harnessing the power of a bow and what it does to you. I'm visualizing exactly what you're talking about. Very similar to like driving a motorcycle, having that power
Mhm.
where you're harnessing it. I don't feel like when you shoot a firearm, you're actually harnessing that power. I feel like you're along for the ride with it. But a bow, you are so in tune from the minute you release that arrow, you know whether it's a good shot or not. You're not having to wait for impact or walk 100 yards and be like, look for this tiny hole. Like, is this where it hit? Like you can feel a good shot.
Yeah, I think you're right. And even, arrows move fast, right? 300 feet per second or so. But you can see it. You can feel it and you'll be like, okay. And you spend a lot of time behind a bow. You can really kind of feel that arrow and watch it through the air and be like, yep, okay, that about went where I wanted, or no, I gotta adjust something. It's You're so much more part of it than a gun that's just like bang, bang, bang. Okay, 2 of those made it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
not that I do rifle hunt, and I'm not anti-rifle, obviously, but, yeah, it's just different, right? It's just that it's exhilarating. There's nothing better.
So there's a host of a fellow podcast, Sam Thrash, of Fall Obsession podcast. He's on the Carbon TV network. He has a show, Texas Dirt, in his podcast. And I was like, man, Texas Dirt, where is he located at in Texas? And so I went to his
Yeah.
website and I shot him a message. Turns out he lives like 45 minutes from me, and now we're really good buddies. And
Oh
His
man.
wife sold us some chicken eggs that we ended up hatching, so our flock is from theirs, and like it just like that's the beauty of the community that hunting provides for people. So Sam, he doesn't like to talk about it, but he's a state champion, Texas state champion archer in high school, and
Oh
I'm
wow.
like, dude, that's badass. I love that. But he does not hunt with a rifle, and I'm like,
Oh.
I'm like, dude, you got to go chase some hogs with me with thermal optics. He goes, well, can you put one on a bow?
Oh my god.
I'm like, well, no, you're gonna have to use a gun. You know how to shoot one of those? Like,
Dude, that's great.
anyways, but he's addicted to bow hunting. Like,
Yeah.
I get it. He's not anti-gun. It's not about that. It is about this. Well, I don't even want to put the words in his mouth. It's exactly what we talked about.
Yeah.
Really, really, what it comes down to.
Well, and like to rifle hunting, so ironically, I take my son out 2 years ago. And when I got my first elk, it was with a rifle, it was a cow elk hunt. And like I don't when I say about my first elk hunting, I actually don't even tell that story a whole lot because I don't feel like that was my first hunting experience. As awful as that sounds and disjointed as that sounds, it's kind of, hey, it's my hunting journey,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, so when I say the first time I went elk hunting was with my son and actually got in range with elk is just a few years ago. It's really what I compartmentalize. And so I shot an elk at 450 yards and fun, great, awesome. We got off the mountain. A year later, by like the day or within a day, we went back to that same place. My son had the tag. He shot an elk within 50 yards of where I had shot mine
No
a
way.
year
That's
apart.
awesome.
Like so cool. And so we're coming up for our third time here in December. I got the same tag. I've got the tag this year. And he's like, well, do we just kind of go back to the same spot? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. Like, that's where they like to be. Um, but that experience of seeing the elk for the first time and getting within range to share that with my son really helped me want to hunt with more people. And because I'm just a big solo hunter, I just go out all the
Mm,
time by myself. And one thing I tell people is when you hunt with somebody else, whether they're better than you or not, my son, right? Whatever I teach him, he's just kind of like, okay, cool, that's hunting.
yeah.
Um, you still learn more being with somebody because they have observations. And he's like, well, hey, this is happening. And what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh, geez, I didn't think about that. So you can really learn quicker with somebody else. Um, and that's one thing I like to tell people is like, don't be too much of a lone wolf. Like, bring someone else along, even if it's somebody who's you're kind of maybe mentoring.
Yeah. Well, a diamond is only as beautiful as the facets in which it holds, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so the perspective, like I'm holding up this glass right here, and what you see is completely different than what I see on the backside of it. And I talk about this as a school teacher in my health classes that through our experiences create perspectives, and through our perspectives create thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, and then they lead to consequences. And consequences are neither negative nor positive, they're just a result of. And
Mm,
so I, very similar to you, like I rather be with other people. Number one, because I like to have sounding boards. I almost to a fault. Like I also then also need to back up and learn and trust my own instinct. And I think that's the crutch. It's that constant yin and yang or symbiotic relationship of being able to not lean on other people, trust yourself. But then when you hunt solo, you don't want
yeah.
to trust other people because you're like, well, I can do this all on my own.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting dichotomy. And I used to snowboard. I used to work at REI, and that's something I want to get into a conversation with you here in just a little bit. Is when I used to snowboard, I snowboard all the time solo because it was an expensive sport, and not many people like at that time could afford to do it. And so, but I hated it because going off of jumps and whatever, it was only as cool as like, hey man, did you see that?
Yeah,
Hey, did you see
exactly.
how much air I got or whatever? It's like I didn't have anyone to turn and talk to on that. And so when it came to hunting, it was hunting with a community. I didn't care if it was one person or we're bringing a whole crew, and then that whole crew didn't see animals. It was still being with people and sharing those common experiences and bonds, and hearing those different perspectives that really like lit that fire for hunting inside of me.
Yeah. No, it's fun to get more back into people. I've gotten more hunting with people as of recently, and it's just kind of a cool part of it. And but I still like going alone. I am a bit of a lone wolf, which has its own issues, but I tell people try not to be. There's a lot of benefits of not being
Yeah.
so much alone.
At least get a community that you can call and ask questions to and play out scenarios and be like, hey, this is what I did. What do you think about this situation?
Yeah,
Because I
it's
know that
helpful.
that happens a lot. That's actually here in Texas, because I feel like a reverse pioneer. Like, it's always like, I want to go out west to hunt, go out west to hunt. I'm
Hmm.
going out east to hunt.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in these blinds all by myself this last year, hunting solo for the very first time. And being like, am I doing it right? What am I doing? Is it the wind? Is it my noise? Is it, you know, whatever? And I made a really good buddy down here in Texas that I would just, that's one of the things whitetail hunting is like, you have cell service. So I'm texting him in the blind. Hey, is this happening? It's just very interesting. However, killing a deer last year for the very first time all by myself, even though I've gutted animals before, I've skinned animals, I've gone through this process, that doing it by yourself and be like, okay, I guess here we are,
Yeah.
is really
That is
fascinating.
that's a whole new level. Like when you've sealed the deal and the animal's on the ground, it's like, here we go, like deep breath, um, and don't cut the stomach.
Right.
That's
Got a
all I
little
care about.
got a little pee-pee on the meat. It's okay.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I swear I've pierced so many stomach linings. It's like, okay, don't do that.
Right.
Uh, but no, you're right. Like that whole, okay, here's where the work starts. It's a bit of a mental bender, but I again, it's hard. I have a little bit of a hard time getting in there. Even when I was with my coworker Craig the other day and I shoot this big buck, when the excitement dies down, I literally looked at him and I said, "Okay, where should we start?"
Now
And,
what?
and I've done 12 of these. I mean, probably 10 or 12 animals. And he's like, "Well, here's where I like to start." And I'm like, "Okay, you go ahead. Like, I'll follow you." I mean, sometimes it is nice having someone else there because you can kind of like get through it together.
Hmm.
But yeah, when you're alone, it's like, all right, what cuts am I going to screw up now? I
Have
just
you
got to
ever
get through it.
Yeah, have you ever killed an elk by yourself?
No, oh my gosh. And I was on an elk hunt with two other guys, and we're at the trailhead, and this homie rolls up in like this old Toyota, no shirt, moccasins, the flap. Oh yeah, like the homemade Indian flap thing
Oh
covering
yeah.
his privates, pulls a traditional bow out of the back of his truck, arrows, oh, like full like archaic guy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And he walks up to us. And it was so funny to me. He walks up and there's three of us. We've got one tag. I mean, we can get that elk out of there, no problem. And he walks up and he's like, okay, so if I get an elk, how do you guys recommend like getting it out, like packing it out? This guy's no shirt, moccasins, traditional bow. I mean, clearly he's made all this stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like hours of YouTube to make his little outfit. I mean, it was weird. It was so weird. And we're like, well, you get game bags, and one guy's explaining it, and he looks at us and he's like, oh my gosh, like he hadn't thought it out. He turned around, puts the bow in the back of the truck, gets it, and just drives away. And I'm just like, well, how'd you think it was gonna? I mean, we had like broken him. Like we felt kind of bad. We're just like, you pack it out, and it's good to have some help.
Okay, first off, my reaction to you telling that story is, what a perfect guest for your podcast.
No. Yeah, I can't track him down because I don't have pigeon carriers
Yeah,
or
you're like,
smoke signals.
sir, can I please get your smoke signal?
Bro, that guy's off the grid. Like No, he doesn't want anyone fight. It was weird. I always wonder if he was like not real. I was like a hallucination. I was like, what era did you just pop out of? It
Yeah.
was so weird.
He's like,
I'm glad we ran into him.
I'm not hunting elk. I'm hunting peyote. I'm just carrying this bow for fun.
Yeah, I'm going in for a long bow walk. It was weird. Super weird.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so talking about weird moments. You working in, and maybe this isn't weird for you, but I have some weird experiences that I would imagine would relate with you, is
Yeah.
going from the industry. You worked in the outdoor industry, but you worked for Columbia. Columbia doesn't make camouflage. It's known more as a West Coast granola REI type store, outdoor wear,
Hmm.
to you working at Cabela's. So my background is I used to work at REI selling backpacks and backpacking. Like I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, different things, all this. And
Yeah.
then one day I learned how to hunt and I learned what public land was. I was like, guys, you won't believe this. I get to do the exact same thing, but carry a gun and go hunting. And they all looked at me like, what?
Why would you do that?
Yeah. Did you ever
Yeah.
have any experiences in your journeys of working in the outdoor space, but not in the hunting industry?
Most awkward experience I had. So I've worked mostly in marketing my whole career, and so I've done a lot of like influencer relations, blogger. We used to call them bloggers. We don't call them that anymore. And people who write for magazines, publishers, media content creators. And coming from Columbia, it was very much what you just described. Lightweight backpacker gear. That kind of REIE type person. And I'm in a couple years into my hunting experience, sharing it, oh, I shot my target. Look, I hit the bullseye kind of stuff. And this one gal who I've known my whole career. And, I'm talking about killing the animal, processing it, cutting it up. I'm end to end, full experience. And she sends me a message, and I can just feel her timidness over the keyboard on the other side. And she's, Denver, Colorado, right? Like full on composter. I compost, by the way, so I can make fun of that. But and she's just like, "Hey, I've been talking to my husband, and we want to get into hunting. And I'm curious if you could kind of get us started, or I just have a few questions." I'm like, "Yeah, of course." Like, and I don't know anything, right? And I'm like, "Well, here's what I did," and just kind of sharing it. And then at the end, she says, can you just like keep this between us? Like, don't tell people that I'm it's like I was a drug dealer, and she's like getting her fix, and she's like, please don't tell my family that I'm still, struggling. It wasn't weird. It was just like very funny that I think sometimes we get online, we share our stories of hunting, and I'm very timid sometimes. Like, okay, is there too much blood on that photo? Like, I want to be very respectful. And it was just funny. This gal had been watching me for a while, and she's like, so how do we kill something? I'm like, okay, well, make sure to bring your washable Patagonia fleece, because, blood easily rinses off, but it's got to be the right type of fleece. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. But now the other one I've had pretty good experiences. Like I've never had somebody like raking me across the coals. But there was one time I was packing an animal off the mountain, and it was like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm pretty excited. I mean, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I did it, and it was like probably my second or third. And walking off the mountain, and this cute little girl, college young woman is walking up with her big dog, and she is Patagonia poster child, right? And I'm just like, oh, here we go. And I've got these big white game bags that are blood stained. And I'm like, okay. And I'm always very nice on the trail. I'm like, hey, how are you? Wow, the colors of fall are so pretty, and all that. And she's very nice. And I'm like trying to inch my back so she can't see what's on my back. Cause I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not doing this. I'm just trying to play it safe. I don't know who you have lunch with, right? And who's going to ride a law tomorrow that we can't do this here anymore. And her dog just would not leave me alone, sniffing me, on me. And I'm like, oh, that's so weird. And then it was just like, you couldn't explain it without explaining it. And so I say to her, I'm like, I just, I have a deer on my back. I just shot one. Like, that's why your dog is like in love with my butt. And she just was like, "Oh, okay. Well, okay." And she was very kind and we kind of parted, but it was just that was kind of an awkward little trail interaction, but very respectful. Like I was respectful, she was. It worked out.
You know, that's a great story, by the way. you tell that you tell that very exceptional. So see, this is why you and your stories resonate with me and my stories because we have so much in common. The very first big game animal that I killed was actually spotted by a female yoga instructor from Seattle. She was on a day hike 9 miles into the backcountry with
Hmm.
two male students and a dog that wouldn't stop barking. And I'm like, oh, now I thought, this is what early days where it's like, you have to go deeper than any other hunter and go,
Yeah.
you will find the animals. And then day hikers roll up with a dog barking. And I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
so I'm standing there in camouflage. And by the way, I like to bridge the gap. Birkenstocks, those were my camp shoes, like
Yes.
actual leather ones with cork bottoms. So that I backpacked in because, that's what I wear. I used to work at REI. Hello. So she comes up. She's like, "What are you guys doing?" I had two other buddies I recruited to come with me. And they're like, "Oh, we're hunting." "Oh, you're hunting? Well, what are you hunting?" "Bears." "What? You can
Oh
hunt
my gosh.
bears?" "Wait a minute. There's bears here?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, there's bears all over here. You got to be careful." So the day goes on. We come back for dinner and we make a meal. No less than we're about to, get out and put our gear on. I'm still in my Birkenstocks and shorts. Like it's hot. It's 90 something degrees in the state of Washington. And she goes, "Bear!" I look at her because she's only standing like 30 yards from me at this time. I'm like,
Oh my
"Are
gosh.
you kidding me?" And my other two buddies, they grab their guns and they take off. I'm like, "I do not believe you at all." So
Yeah.
I put on my bino harness and slip my feet into my Birkenstocks and I meander over to her and I'm like, "Did you actually see a bear?" And her face is white as a ghost and eyes just big and she just points. And I'm like, "Okay, I believe you." At that point, I turn
Yeah.
around. I don't see anything, but where she was pointing was actually about 120 yards from us at the time. So, the long story short, I actually believe, and this is not actually recorded in Guinness Books of World Records, but I do believe I hold the number one fastest land record speed in Birkenstocks and also the first person to ever kill a big game animal wearing Birkenstocks.
Yes.
I ended up chasing this bear down, running through the mountains of Washington in Birkenstocks
No
and
way.
ended up shooting this black bear at 30 yards and that kicked off everything. Welcome to my podcast.
Dude, that is amazing. Oh
But
my
these are the
gosh.
experiences that we have with, I'll use the term the other side, you
Yeah.
know, anti-hunters, non-hunters, when we are hunters and go in a field. We also
Yeah.
need to be aware that we're all ambassadors for this. Even if you think you are or you think you're not, whether you're a blogger or an influencer or, you know,
Yeah. No, I just a quick story, but the buck I shot last year, that was my first buck for archery. And I was very excited, but the problem was I didn't get to enjoy it. It was a bad shot. It ran forever. It was a huge tracking job. We had to come back hours later and it was terrible. But a lady had come up to me while I was going up the mountain. Well, no, I go up the mountain, I put another arrow in and kills the animal. And then I walk back down to my truck because it was very close to the road. And she comes because it was like kind of a public area.
mhm.
It was the worst. Oh, I was like, can I not do this at night? Or I wish I could do it at night. It was like broad daylight. It's terrible. And she comes up and she's holding her phone and she's recording.
She's
And
like,
I'm like,
"You're leaving that animal."
yeah, no, she comes up. She's like, did you just shoot that animal? And I said, "Yes." Like, I'm gonna say one-word answers because I can. And she was like, "Oh, oh." And it was so funny, the intonation of me saying yes almost surprised her, like, "Oh, oh,
Like
you're not hiding it."
like she wanted to
She
catch you
was
in a lie.
yeah, like, she wanted to be like, like I was supposed to say like, "Oh, oh, no," I said, "Yes, I shot that deer." And she's like, "Oh." I said, "It's public land. I shot it earlier. I had to, shoot it again, and, now the animal's down. I'm gonna go clean it up with my son." And she's like, "Oh," and she puts the phone away. And I'm like, "Oh, I'll tell you what, someone shoving a camera in your face when it's not, like, consensual,
Mhm.
no way.
Yeah.
That'll spike anxiety more than anything." And so it's funny how my intonation was just very confident, and I was like, yep, I've got a tag, whatever." She's like, "Oh, okay." So she leaves. I run back up the mountain. I look at my son. I'm like, "We got to get this deer in the truck. Now we got to go." I said, "We got to hustle." And
Like
we just,
you did a crime or something.
yeah. And I was like, because I'm thinking, crap, she called the cops. Oh, great. And I'm like, "We got to go." And it sucks because we didn't gut it. We just took it whole. And so I'm thinking, where am I going to gut this animal? Like I've got to go drive to another area. And anyway, I come back to the truck. She's right there. And I'm like, "Oh, heavens." And she comes up and we get the truck, the buck in the bed and all this stuff. And I slam the truck bed. I'm like, yep, okay, we're moving. Like, I'm not here to make friends. And she comes up and she's like, "One more thing." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like what now?" I'm freaked out, because I'm still kind of a newer hunter. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? I'm like, did I do something wrong? Like, I'm questioning everything. And she's like, "My daughter would like to see the deer." And I'm like, "Oh, that changed directions." And so I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Sure." You know? So the daughter comes over and she's like, "Mommy, mommy, look, deer." And I'm like, "Okay, are we done?" Like, it was normally I'm like so nice. I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's talk, whatever." I just didn't trust it. I was
Mhm.
like, I just know a cop is gonna roll up. And
Yeah.
so I was like, "Well, nice to meet you. Great. Have a good day. We're out." And I flipped around and got out of there. It was just one of those things where it's like, it wasn't bad, but oh man, I'll tell you, when someone's got a camera in your face, it's never a good thing. I think that's the rudest thing anyone could ever do to somebody.
Yeah. Do you said you gut shot this deer?
No, that was it was a lower shot, like below the heart. And yeah, it just was not a great shot. It ran for quite a while. And
Which at that point, your heart's already sunk to your gut.
ex- exactly. And so many deer before that, it was like less than 50 yards. Like I was very proficient with my bow, whatever. And this was a very close shot. It was like a 30-yard shot.
Mhm.
And, I'm hitting stuff 70. My longest actual shot was a 90-yard on a doe. And
Sweet.
and it was down in 10 yards. Like I feel pretty darn proficient, like I feel pretty good. And so that's what's hard
Mhm.
is this should have been a very slam dunk deal and it wasn't. And so I'm already kind of ramped up and anyway. So
Interesting. Dude, that's so fascinating. The stories that never get told, right?
yeah.
Like how many things have happened in people's lives that have hunted that more or less go to the grave with them, right? That
Yeah.
um that's why I love the power of stories, right? Like we've read um, you know, stories of Hercules and Achilles and these old awesome stories of old. Well, we're creating our own each and every day. It's just a matter of whether you want to document them or share them with other people or I love videoing my hunts because there's so many times, especially having young children. I come
Hmm.
home from a hunt and kids crying or here you go, the wife hands off the kid to me and she's like, I need a break, that I never actually get to break down my epic experiences with my spouse or with my children. That it's like, guys, watch this. you
Yeah.
know, see, this is what it's all about. That uh, that the story is so powerful, and you're telling these stories so well. I feel like I'm there. I love it. You
Yeah.
got me hooked, and which, by the way, I can only imagine how epic your podcast is, and why people are addicted to hearing these types of stories and experiences and all that. So, is that what made you want to kick off First Generation Bowhunter?
Yeah, I remember I was being interviewed on a show, like 2 years before I started the podcast, and, like, mid-podcast of me being interviewed, I decided I was gonna do it, and I decided on the name, and I was sitting there talking, and I'm getting all these questions, and I said, "Well, yeah, I'm a first generation bow hunter and blah, blah," and he's like, "Whoa, well, what do you mean by that?" I said, "Well, I didn't grow up doing this, like, I'm first generation bow, like, no one else taught me this," and he's like, "Interesting." I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna start a podcast. It's gonna be called First Generation Bowhunter." I mean, it was like in that moment, and it was my second podcast. My first one was a marketing one. That one took me 4 years from inception to actually start it
Mm,
because I was driven a little bit by fear of like, what are people gonna think? Am I just gonna add to the noise? And I was really glad I did it. It really helped me cut my teeth because when I knew I was gonna do this one, I was like, okay, I'm not going to wait that long. And I don't think it was 2 years. I think it was pretty shortly after. I just kind of had to get some ducks in a row. And, but yeah, I created the logo on Canva. Took me 5 minutes
shout out to
and
Canva. I use it every day.
yeah, like, you know, and just kind of went with it. And it was just like, yeah. And so it was funny how it blurted out and came out in conversation, and that's, 'cause sometimes we stew over what am I going to call it, and I did have ideas for a hunting podcast, and I remember there was this thing in my mind where I'm like, okay, so what other hunting podcasts are out there? Okay, you got Meat Eater, oh geez, well, they're like the mothership of content. Then you have like Gritty, and then you've got like just these big huge names, and I'm like, I have no business playing in this space. I am a nobody. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to embrace that. I am the nobody hunter. And because what I feel is when I go on Instagram is, I see these incredible shots and trophies and all these things. And I'm like, how did you get there? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
are you private, public? Like, there's no details. There's no like connecting the dots. And I was like, I want to be the guy that connects the dots of
Hmm.
like, the wind changed. That's what screwed up the whole hunt. Guys, you have to pay attention to the wind. And so those are the kind of messages I get when people listen to my content. They're like, dude, I listened to that one episode on my way to a hunt. And that's what changed everything about that hunt. And that's how I got a shot, is because that thing you said about that hunt where you made 14 mistakes, but then you made the one right decision and you killed the animal. And
Yep.
I'm like, that's why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So I will never be a big meat eater level, like whatever. And that's totally okay because I believe there is a space for the beginner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a Hall of Fame football coach in the state of Washington, who's no longer alive, Frosty Westering, a dude who I truly love, and he always spoke about making the big time where you're at. Um, you don't have to be big to make an impact. You just get to make the big time where you're at, and that is some of the coolest stuff in regards
Yeah.
to how I always remember. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't care if a topic's been talked about, written about, showed about a million times. It's never been shared from your perspective.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I love that.
So, okay, here's a question for you, and I find it something I I gut check myself a lot on this nowadays. You brought up Meat Eater. The opposite of Steve Ranella is his brother over at Hunt Quietly, and yet you already mentioned this on the podcast earlier, where it's like, oh yeah, we needed to go film some content for game bags, and so we were like, oh, let's
Mhm.
go kill an animal or whatever. What's your personal view on this idea of hunting turning into an industry rather than a lifestyle, or however else you want to explain it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it had to turn into an industry because truthfully, to get the education out there. I have a ton of respect for Steve Rinella. I truly believe he is actually one of the reasons why I killed my first deer, because I had gotten so screwed up on so many shots before, misses, shakes, all of that. And in one of his episodes, he wrote on his fletching, "Do not get excited." And so I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to do that. So I get on my fletchings and I wrote, "Do not get excited," on like 5, different arrows. And it worked. And I got into place. I pulled back and I just kept thinking, don't get excited. It's not time yet. You haven't done anything yet. And I released the arrow, I killed the animal. And I was just like, if I hadn't watched that Netflix episode of Meat Eater, I wonder if I would have sold my bow last season.
Huh.
You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if I would have just, and that's one of my things too. I tell people is don't sell your bow. Don't sell your bow. Just hang on to it one more season. Stick with me. I think if you listen to these 5 episodes, I think you can get there. I'm the industry. I'm part of the industry. Like, yeah, I am industry. I mean, so for example, like I have a partnership with Gold Tip, right? And so I use Gold Tip arrows. That's what I kill my animals with. That's what I practice with. And so, Gold Tip, they're industry. And so, like, I think hunting was a dying sport, truthfully. When I worked at Cabela's, we would say sometimes, and I guess I can say this, it doesn't matter. Our audience is dying. Think about it. Granddaddy with the lease of land and all the guns and everything, he's going to die in 5 years. He can't buy anything at Cabela's. He's literally going to die. And so, like, and we'd kind of joke about it, like as kindly as we could, but it was like, can you imagine running a business where your audience is literally dying? And that's the hunting industry. And so this whole wave of, these camo brands popping out of nowhere, I'm thinking of backpacks like Initial Ascent, was nothing, didn't exist 10 years ago. Now they're, Kuiu, Sitka, even Sitka. Think about Sitka. Sitka was this technical Arc'teryx North Face type of gear.
Yeah.
When I first touched Sitka, I was like, oh, Arc'teryx.
Yeah, it's the Arc'teryx of hunting.
It is. And so, to answer your point, I think it had to. Otherwise, I think it would have died. And I think the other thing that needed to happen was the training element and the health element. That was a big part for me. I was diagnosed with, I was like 2 sugar points away from type 2 diabetes, which is what my mom died from. And I remember talking to the doctor and she's like, you have got to get on your health. Like, you are about to fall apart. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was hunting. But then, like, I joined the Mountain Ops community, and it was this incredible experience of like, I'm getting healthy and whatever. Yeah, I bought stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I bought into a community. I bought into products. So for me as a product guy, that I love selling. I love getting people like their first pair of boots, that comfortable pack, that type of thing. I just think the hunting industry needed it more than ever. And I think when people are close to the hunting industry or like a consumer of it, they think like, oh man, they're so next level. Dude, we are so far behind. Oh my gosh. Look at REI, look at North Face. They are 10 years ahead of hunting industry.
Yeah.
I say that without hesitation, because I've played both sides. I've been on brand, I've been on retail, I've been on SaaS software. So, hunting still as an industry is very, very far behind. It's still very much a myopic, view of like how things should do, because they don't speak to the 4 types of hunters: the beginner, the mentor, the veteran, the trophy hunter. So anyway, to answer your question, I think it really did to have to survive, to pay for tags. And that's the other thing I tell people too, like the REI crowd. It's like, oh, you hunters, you're just, whatever. I'm like, do you know how much we spend in tags? Do you know how much we spend in hotels and gas and food? And we're infusing all this money into the economy in other ways. And oh, you paid $5 for your day pass at the little, day use part. Oh, and yeah, slow clap. Like, and I was that guy, right? I can make fun of that guy because I was that guy. I drove a Subaru for 10 years. So like, I just think like there is a lot more, and it's a very cash rich community as well. Even Cabela's, like we had a credit card, the Cabela's Club. I'm sure you've been invited to have
Yep.
it at least 18 times in one visit at Cabela's. And it was cool about that is the members of the credit card are very healthy credit card users, right? They pay off on time. They had a huge FICO score. It was like the top 7 credit card in the world. I don't know
Really?
if anyone knows this. Yeah, the Cabela's credit card user is the top 7th in terms of health, in terms of paying it off on time, FICO scores, credit scores. I'm not saying most popular. It's by user base of their behavior as a consumer.
A responsible user of a credit card.
Responsible user.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I mean by top 7 in the world, which is crazy. Like, and so to me, I'm kind of like, the hunting industry needed a Sitka First Light to come along and be like, yeah, okay, there's more to this, and there's something more that people can believe in. Because in my mind, I think a brand and industry is something that people can believe in across a very infinitely scalable platform, aka the internet, and social media just poured gas all over that. But yeah, you get into the intricacies of like how people are like getting in there and how they're portraying themselves. Yeah, you got to be thoughtful. I mean, there's some content out there that has raised a lot of eyebrows, and to non-hunters, they're like, "Oh my gosh, is that what you do? Is that how you kill things?" And you're shooting thing, and it's just kind of like, well, not that guy. We don't like him, but we try to be a little bit more respectful. So it's tricky. It's going to be interesting what the next 5 or 10 years look like.
It's already changed so much for me, just from 2018 to now, of what I've experienced, right?
Yeah.
And it's
how so?
So I got in when Kuyu was probably only 2 or 3 years old, right? When Jason Harrison more or less was just putting Kuyu on the map, and then about 2 years after I started, he passed away. I remember Robbie Kroger of Blood Origins was on my podcast like the week that Jason died, and it was just like, he was like, "Man, I had so much respect for that guy, and he did so much for hunting," and I'm like, "Geez, there's a lot for me to learn." And, like I have no clue. Like I haven't even shot a deer yet.
Yeah.
But yes, watching the hunting industry through YouTube and Instagram specifically, it sucks you in. And I think it's very polarizing to where it either makes you want to go deeper in it, or it makes you want to put the brakes on and remove yourself and be like, I actually don't want to turn on any electronics or know anything about anything.
Yeah. I can see that.
Then, that's just, obviously those are polarizing sides of the story, but my view of it is just, it's so awesome. It's such a phenomenal tool for community and connectivity. Not for lying, not for ego, not for any of that, but for a dude who didn't have anyone, who went Field of Dream style, if you build it, they will come.
Yes.
That is why the hunting industry is so powerful for me, because of the relationships and the stories and the connectivity. And it's like, I got to a point where I've only ever killed maybe 2 animals, big game animals at this point in my life. But because of the podcast, because of my blog, and because of my community events that I was doing, I was already getting invites to hunt with people that I would watch on TV. And I'm like, what?
That's crazy.
This is incredible.
Yeah. No, it's true. The community side of it is incredible. Like being on this side of like the content creation, and just it's like if not me, then who? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I watch a fair amount of fishing as well. Like there's this girl, Ashley Ray, who I freaking love. She's on LinkedIn, and she posts fishing videos on LinkedIn. She's my favorite person to follow on LinkedIn because she doesn't post stupid business quips all the time. She's just so like raw. and we'll go back and forth. And she's actually very popular on LinkedIn, and it's total Instagram content that does not belong there. And I've followed her for so many years, and she just talks about her fishing and these incredible GoPro shots. And that to me is just like, I've never met her in person, but I've been talking to her since I was at Columbia Sportswear. And I think we sent her some fishing shirts one time. But it's just so mind boggling to me that we can have these connections for so long around these passions.
Yeah.
And it's like, what were we doing before? And not that it was bad, but maybe that's the reason why it took me so long to get into this, because maybe I didn't have really a community around me, which is probably the case. I was climbing mountains, I was rock climbing, I was backpacking. Like, we are the average of who we spend most time with, right? We hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was probably going to stay a backpacker, honestly. Which is fine, but yeah. So,
well, backpacking is awesome, which I started out as well. But the problem with backpacking is that you're told to stay within the lines. You know, you're like, hey, don't color outside the box. Well, hunting is coloring outside the box to the extreme. And that is where you push the limits and the boundaries, and you get to know who you are rather than following someone else's footsteps.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like, no hunt is the same.
No.
Right. I've been on backpacking trips where they feel very similar. And my brother has a really great saying where, when you go on like vacations and you share it and people around you are like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Like, will you take me there? And maybe the opportunity comes where you can actually take them. And you're like, yeah, sure. Like, we'll go to the lake, we'll do this thing, we'll, eat at the restaurant, whatever. And you go and you're kind of like, no, this feels a little different. Like, it doesn't feel like that first time, or it's just like, and so my brother, his phrase that he uses is, you can't microwave a steak. It doesn't taste the same the second time. And I get that a lot. Sometimes people will be like, oh my gosh, like, will you take me bow hunting? And I'm like, yeah, but like, it's not going to be like that first time. Like, I can't recreate that. I can't microwave this and be like, I don't know. It's interesting, I guess, but it is new. Like, that's what I do like about hunting is it's never the same,
Yeah. Well, the 80s band Foreigner, feels like the first time. Feels like the first time.
Oh my gosh. We're actually coming up with some 80s tees for Camo Fire. We do a Christmas, we sell like 5 exclusive limited edition t-shirts, and I want to do like this whole 80s thing. Like, I really want to do it. Badlands gear. I love Badlands. I think they are hilarious. They're very subtle. They're like that very like calm uncle who's super funny that everyone like listens to, but it's not obnoxious. That's Badlands to me. But he has this deer jumping on his shirt, and it says, never gonna let you down. What is it? Never gonna.
Oh, Rick Astley. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down.
Yes. And it says, never gonna give you up. And it's just like, man, if you were a kid of the 80s, like, you just totally get that. And so I commented on their Instagram post. I said, never gonna let you down. And it is the most liked comment on that thread, because everyone's just like, yeah.
They Rick rolled you, man.
Yeah, dude.
Yes.
Like, get it. Yeah. So anyway, we are taking 80s lyrics, and we're gonna camo fire them.
I love that. So, that's a good idea. Can I help with that? Can I be a part of that?
Dude, shoot me some ideas, man, because I'm gonna go into this and I want to come in swinging. Like, I want to do. It's just like, I don't know. We got to do something different. We got to have some fun. So
that's something where you guys might need to take to social media and put it out to the crowd and say, guys, give us your best shot.
Yeah,
see what I did?
Yeah.
Hit me with your best shot.
We do that with the Black Ovis product. We create our own product, a lot of head to toe, a lot of gear, tripods and whatnot. But my product guy will come to me. He's like, hey, what do you think of this down jacket? Blah, blah. I'm like, throw it on Facebook. What does it matter what I think? Like, I'm a focus group of one. You don't want to hear me.
Yeah.
And so we'll go on Facebook. We'll do Instagram polls. Oh my gosh. Like, that's the other thing. Back to your industry question. When you can take the community and be like, hey, what do you guys think of this glove? Do you want it like this or like that? Do you want grip? Do you want it smooth? Oh my heavens. Like, the amount of information we can get and create something in 6 weeks or 6 months,
Yep.
oh, it's incredible.
I got to give a shout out to Camo Fire and Black Ovis just for a sec, because when I was getting into hunting, I was like, man, where can I go get some good deals on some
Yeah.
gear? And Camo Fire. And when I learned of it, I was like, oh, this place is sweet.
Yeah. No, Camo Fire is a funny story. Kendall Card started it, and I'm not as good at telling the story, but it actually started in 2008, and that was the market crash. So the economy was in a recession, it was freak out. I mean, it was scary. I don't know. Do you remember '08?
Oh, yeah. I was alive then.
Yeah. I know you lie, but like some people I say '08 and they're like, well, what happened? I'm like,
No,
2008, like the market crash.
a lot of people lost their jobs, and a lot of my friends
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yep.
I remember my buddy, he owns a movie theater down in New Mexico. And I said, oh my gosh, like, how are you guys? Are you guys okay? He's like, people are still going to the movies, you know? And it was that one industry that didn't die, because it was like, well, I've got $15. I'm going to go see a movie because they want to overcome their depressing life. I mean, it was super depressing, but they launched Camo Fire and it took off because everyone's like, well, I'm not going to stop hunting, but I need to get better deals. And it swooped in, and it was, so Kendall was not expecting that at all. I mean, it was like he'd been working on that for a while, and they launched, and it was like, dude, that was our spring pad. It was crazy.
I think it was woot.com. It actually got bought out by Amazon, but they would do the deal of the day, and it launched at one time, and it would sell out instantly. And Camo Fire started with that type of concept, if I remember correctly. Where it's like, hey, you could get a Sitka jacket today. And it's like, oh, man, they're out of my size already. Like,
yeah. No, it was like they played off FOMO, and they played off that scarcity mindset so well. Like, I've tried to explain to him how genius it was. I said, not to turn it bad or anything, but it really is a bit of a gambling mindset, which is why gambling is so addicting. And slot machines, it's that same kind of mental thing that happens of, well, I want to, you know, that reload.
Yep.
You swipe to reload, and there used to be a shotgun sound on the website that would go, you know, and it would reload the deals. Because and you look at your phone. What do you do every day on your email? You drag, and it spins,
and let
and
it go.
and you let it go, and you look for new emails, and that was Camo Fire. It's basically a hunting slot machine. But they started out one deal a day, and it would sell out. And he's like, man, we'd sell stuff out at like 9 a.m. You know, and he's like, should we put more on there? So they started doing back-to-back deals. Now they're up to 80 deals a day, and it's kind of that sweet Goldilocks flavor. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to be part of. It's a fun brand to be part of.
That is so cool. And, you know, it's really interesting. And here's another thing that when I was getting into the hunting industry, stuff like this wasn't that old.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Yeah, it started in 2008 is what you said, but it didn't feel like it's been around for that long by the time I found it.
Yeah, it was still very new then. No, they were probably in their infancy. And I love when Kendall tells the stories of getting phone calls. And he was on an elk hunt, and he was 100 yards within an elk, and his phone goes off. And he picks it up, and he's like, camofire.com, this is Kendall. Like, straight up, dude. And the guy's like, oh, hey, wow, thanks for answering. Like, I'm actually talking to somebody. He's like, yeah, how can I help you? You know, and he had some question about an order, and so he quickly takes some notes. He's like, yeah, okay, well, I'll look right into that, and I'll get back to you, whatever. And the way the story, the reason behind that story is Kendall shares it with new employees, and he says, this company is so important to me that I will pause my elk hunt knowing that I can get a shot on elk, but that customer is more important.
Yeah.
And so again, not to take it back to your industry question, but it's like, there are brands that truly like care and take care of people to be like, you know what, my hunt is not as important as this person's question about their order, you know, that kind of thing. So super fun. And then Black Ovis came later, about 2012. The cool thing I like about Black Ovis, we do custom arrows. And so you can get on, build your specs, your helical, your colors. I mean, a billion different designs. Pick your arrow, and we'll build it. And we'll ship you a box of a fresh dozen arrows that are cut to your length, ready to go. And I just love that. I love that product that we do.
That's
It's like
cool.
no other.
That's
Yeah,
cool. Man, you're getting me all jacked up. I love
I
it.
know.
And, nostalgia is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no,
S-
it's fun.
So, what's on the horizon for you?
I think for me, I want to keep leaning into the podcast. I took a break there for a bit. My dad passed away last July, and I was one of the executors. Just so on a personal note, if you're an executor of your parents dying, buckle up. It is the worst experience. You have to fill out paperwork you never thought you'd have to fill out. It's months and months and months. And it really kind of destroyed me there for a while. So I took a kind of a long breather. So if you look at my podcast, you'll see these big breaks and big months that I took off. So as I look back, I'm trying to look forward. And so I've kind of gotten through that. I lost my mom 10 years ago. So I am parentless. I am an orphan. It is an odd feeling. It's very weird because I'm only 40 and I feel very young to have lost both parents. But the reason why I share that is I'm thinking it's odd losing your parents because in some ways you don't have someone kind of looking over your shoulder, like, well, what are you doing next? And who are you working for now? And it's kind of like, I'm just gonna go do my thing. And then not that like I was throttled back by my parents or anything.
Yeah.
But it's just like lots of healing that has happened in the last year. And so I really can kind of look ahead. First Generation Bowhunter is going to become a book. It's going to be a hardback, and it's just going to be just a kind of an interesting read of not an allegory per se, but more of, yeah, there's going to be some how to's and some things, but just a lot of story rich content where people can be like, they feel like they're there. Like when I read Wild at Heart and he starts that
Love
first
that book.
paragraph, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm in Colorado, like spotting for him. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, well, I think we're on the elk and I'm cold and I just, that to me is what I want to portray for the First Generation Bowhunter book. Just to kind of help inspire people and take it to a new medium. And and then what else? Here in Utah, I've been here 10 years. I like staying here. I don't think we'll move. I think we're done moving, but I do have kids leaving the house now. It's very odd. It's so weird. I have an 18-year-old. And so we were just shifting into different things. I mean, I could be a grandpa here in a few years. How weird is that? I feel like I just stopped playing with couch pillow forts, and now I'm gonna be like a grand. It's weird. I can't even say the word. It's so weird. It's so weird to me. But to me, I just think it's now passing knowledge down, getting the kids squared away. I've got a 13-year-old who still needs to do hunter education. I've got my 16-year-old son who shot an elk. So we're going to get him on a deer this season. So yeah, professionally, I think I just need to keep creating content into the podcast, and then also leaning into Camo Fire and Black Ovis, what we're doing over there. So yeah, there's some fun things ahead. It's a new chapter. It's wild.
I love that. Do you ever find it hard to work in the hunting industry and then balance hunting for yourself at the same time?
Oh, oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I was actually going to bring that up earlier. It's not like you got to take the rosy goggles off. It is not what it seems. It's still work. I mean, even going out and shooting my biggest buck, and it's like, oh, my biggest buck. Oh, that's so exciting. Okay, how am I going to hold it? What is Mystery Ranch going to think of this shot of the antlers coming out of the pack? And let's make sure it says Metcalf 50 because that's the pack I'm wearing. Like you go into content creation mode and marketing mode, and what email campaign am I going to use these 5 images for? And so I love it. I still enjoy it. It's not that I don't, but when I can like really turn off and I mean turn off the camera and I do a lot of videos. I'm in a lot of ads for both websites. And I love it. I'm very comfortable on camera. Like I enjoy it. But yeah, we're shooting actually going to be putting together a film series called Hunt the Front. The Wasatch Front here in Utah is like a 3-month long archery hunt. And so we're actually going to start filming here in about a week or two. And it's going to be following people along for what I call the 5 to 9 hunter, 5 p.m. at night to 9 a.m. in the morning, right? Go after work, go before. I actually was thinking about calling it that. I like the 5 to 9 hunter. Um, but that's going to be tricky because, I've talked to a few people in the office like, hey, let's follow you around, whatever. And they're like, follow me around. No, like, I'm not telling you where I hunt. I'm not showing you where I go. And it's like, even within the office, it's a little protected there. So it's, it's interesting. It's helped me appreciate hunting more because I'm like, oh, I do this for a living. And when you're out there and you come back and you have crappy content because you're kind of in a rush, it's hard because it's like, okay, well, that's actually what I get compensated for. So it's something I struggle with. I mean, I talk to some people who run like landscaping or concrete businesses, and they're just so like, and they take off for 5 weeks, during
Yeah.
hunting season. They shut down. Me, I'm like, I'm going right now. I'm in our top sales season. It's hard to go hunting for a day right now,
Yeah.
you know.
Man. Yeah, I can only imagine. Um, I know I look at those guys that run construction companies. I'm like, you dogs. Like,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like I'll be guilty. I've looked up cement machine costs before, how to get started. I'm like, I could learn that. First generation cement worker.
uh-huh.
So I just no, but like it's it's where I'm at right now. But I've done this industry for 16 years, not hunt, but hunt and outdoor. I like to specify that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of what I do. I mean, Thanksgiving, Christmas days, I'm checking emails, I'm checking sales reports. I've done it basically my whole career. I don't think I've ever truly shut down. I think last 2 weeks went to the Oregon coast. I shut down pretty well,
Mm.
like closed the laptop, turned off my email. I mean, I was like, I gotta breathe. Like I can't, I don't care how many sales we did yesterday. I've got to just breathe for a minute.
Yeah. When people ask you, what is First Generation Bowhunter podcast about? How do you describe it?
Uh, it's funny with the name.
It kind of tells a story by
It
itself.
kind of is self-explanatory. And when I wear my T-shirt out in public, or what I like, what I say, the DMV, go to the DMV, and everyone can know what you are very, very quickly. Um, I don't even know why that's relevant. I just figure it could spice up the DMV a little bit. But people get it pretty fast. They're kind of like, oh, like for new bow hunters. I'm like, yep, I'm a new bow hunter. I'm still learning, and I share a lot of my follies and what's gone well, what hasn't, and whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, got it. Um, and what's funny about it is when you're on a playing field of new, beginner, amateur, kind of that realm and that category, it's very, even for non-hunters. Like I talk to a lot of women, and they're like, "Oh, I don't hunt, and neither does my husband." But like, "Oh, I totally get that. Like, that's cool. You do bow hunting." You know, if I was like, hunter, and I took all the vowels out, right, and it's like, I'm a hunter show. I don't
Right.
know, like, I just whatever. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think it would be as maybe interesting or welcoming. It would, I'd be like, well, I film all my big game hunts of my trophies, and that's just not me. And I think people would still understand that, but what I found is people do like to talk about it, at least entertain it for a few minutes. Like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Or the other one I get all the time is, oh, I've thought about getting into bow hunting, but it's like it's too intimidating. And I said, oh, then this show is for you because I break it down in a way where it doesn't feel intimidating. And that's the review I get a lot. And they're like, oh, well, I'll check it out. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, it's a very natural conversation versus um oh, you kill things,
Yeah.
right? Like I never really get that. It's more just like, oh, you're a beginner. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
and so are you,
Because they don't
right?
feel threatened by a newbie, someone who doesn't
Yeah,
know it all, right? Like
yeah,
walking into a gun store where the guys behind the counter feel ex- exude this attitude of like, I know it all, and if you're not looking at the gun that I approve of, then you're like, get out of here, scat.
yeah, yeah. Even within the industry, hunting, I'm a bit of a black sheep because they're kind of like, what? You don't know what that's called? Oh, you don't know that? And it's like, nope, I don't. Teach it to me.
Yeah.
Great. Like seriously, if we're not talking to newer hunters, any hunting brand is gonna miss it. They're gonna miss a massive segment. And
Yeah.
so there's a place for us too.
Well, that or your audience is dying.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
So
No, totally.
let me ask you this: always looking forward and having that vision ahead. Is there any is there a time in which you feel like you're no longer first generation bow hunter?
That's a great question. Like, there's going to be a day where I age out, right? Like, no, I'll never not be a first generation bow hunter because even when I'm 80, it was not taught to me.
Yeah.
I still am what I am. Um, it, but I see what you're saying. You're saying, well, man, after like 50 animals on the ground, like you're not so much a beginner, are you? So yeah, it might like kind of shift a little bit, maybe how I talk about it, but I still want to always maintain like a bit of that rawness and a bit of that like, hey man, if you got turned down at the gun counter or the archery counter at the pro bow shop, like come talk to me. Come to my counter.
Yeah.
Like I'm the approachable counter. I'm the one that's not showing the trophies up on the wall. I literally, dude, Johnny, I want to mount a doe in my podcast. Like I want to mount a doe. Like, by the way, okay, so I do want to do one of these t-shirts. Dan Staten, elk hunter.
Yeah.
So his t-shirt is elk hunter HNTR. Dan
Uh-huh.
Staten.
Yeah,
I love
tough.
Dan. I love Dan. Yeah, he's great. I've shot tack with him. I want to do doe hunter in his font. I'm gonna steal his font. I'm gonna get in so much trouble.
I'm actually planning on making a make doe hunting great again episode of my
Oh
show.
my, oh my gosh. Oh,
Yeah.
dude. I mean, seriously, I've shot so many does, right? I mean, but again, like so have so many of my listeners. They're just like, yeah, man. Oh gosh, if I could just get a shot, like I would be insanely stoked, you know?
My first archery
So
deer was a doe.
totally. My
Yes.
first 7 were like,
Well, my
like,
second was just last week, so I mean,
there you go. Yeah.
yeah. Dude, that is cool. I love that.
Yeah.
You are very relatable, Adam. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see and hear and like I find myself I'm gonna go tune into your podcast a whole lot now because I wanna hear your perspective and how you share everything. I always talk to people about, they're like, well, why do you choose this brand over that brand? Or like
Hmm.
I was like, man, the first beer I ever drank was Coors Light. And you know what beer I drink? Well, I don't drink beer anymore, but like if I was to still buy beer, it'd be Coors Light. Why? Because it was the first. Like there's
Yeah.
something special about that connection with your first brand or your first moment or whatever it is that just like tugs the heart and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
connected with you.
Yeah, like people get so aggro on the bow brands
Yeah.
and I get it. Like when you're doing it long enough, but I share that multiple times in various episodes of like the journey of what bow you use and all of that. And no, it's super interesting, but like I kind of take those common topics and then I just flip them upside down a little bit and I'm like, yeah, we're going to talk about it this way. And a good example of that and a question I get all the time, Adam, can I buy a used bow? Think about it. Like, if you're a new bow hunter, you might be freaking out because your buddy's like, no, bro, you got to buy the $1,800 Hoyt, brand new off the rack. I hear that. I hear these comments, like totally. And those comments were given to me. And so I did a whole episode. I think I named it like, it's okay to buy a used bow. Like, that's literally what I named it. Cause it's like, let's just let the air out of the balloon. Let's let it off the pressure valve.
Be-
Like, it's okay.
Because so many people in the archery world, they buy a new bow every year. And it's like, well, what was wrong with that one?
Yeah. No, like I just bought another bow. I bought that new Alpha X from Hoyt this last season. And I was kind of looking for something different, but I had been shooting the RX1 by Hoyt for like the last 6 years, ever since it came out. And just had a really good time on it, shot a lot of animals with it. And I was like ready to keep going with it. But then I was like, you know what? Like, what else is out there? What else do they have? And this Alpha X came out. It's aluminum. It's heavy. Man, you feel it. Like,
Mm.
oof, you feel it. I mean, it's like, whoa, okay, this is not carbon. But it is an Optimus Prime of a bow. My gosh. Like when I send an arrow down, it's just like that with a gold tip is just a gnarly, gnarly package. So I'm having a lot of fun with that bow. But I'm so glad I got to kill something with it already, owning it for like 2 months. You know,
That's awesome.
that doesn't happen a lot. And so I do like to have I would say like get an animal or two under a, at least under a bow, versus like, well, this bow's broken. I'm gonna get the next one. It's like, yeah,
You know what's funny is, and this all came about because of my QAD Ultra Rust. Not throwing. Hey, by the way, I think they're great. I bought another one. I really love them. I'm actually glad I bought another one now because that just goes to show need a second bow. I need a
yeah,
backup bow. I realized how important a second release is. I was
yeah,
like, well, now I need a second bow because if anything ever goes sideways, I want to be able to be like, oh, I'm good to go. I'm shooting
yeah,
this. Everything's right there.
yeah. No, I just sent off both my bows because now I have two, to go get ham skis installed, and so they're at the emergency room getting taken care of right now. And yeah, no, you're right on. Like you get to that level, you're like, yeah, I need another bow, and you got to make it look like the other bow, so that like when your wife sees it, she's like, "Oh yeah, there's this bow," and then you switch it, but they cannot be in the same place at the same time. Don't make that rookie mistake. This is, like and subscribe for more tips from buy, buying two bows. Your host, Adam. Yes.
I like to take evening walks with my wife after the kids go to bed. That's how my wife and I connect. And I was like, babe, this is exactly why I needed another bow. she was like,
There you go.
I actually see that now.
Yeah, there you go. Your wife sounds awesome, by the way. Like you should go hunting. Like
yeah.
that goes a long way. I will say that. Like, I do want to do some episodes, actually bring my wife on and
Mhm.
talk about some serious drama we had earlier this season. But like real stuff, like that's real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like balancing, like, hey, honey, I'm gonna take off for 3 nights. What? Like, and I gave her like a couple days notice. It was bad. I made a lot of mistakes with that altercation. But no, like that's the kind of stuff that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just gonna, spouses are gonna be pissing each other off. It's not gonna be good.
Totally. Couple things off the cuff. Number one, make sure all the honeydew list is done before you go hunting. Number two, go on a date with your spouse before you go on a long hunt.
Oh, dude,
Schedule a date. Yeah, and that's what
agreed.
happened that week. Is I had a date scheduled a couple days prior, and things were in good spirits.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I did too. I was doing a little bit of that prep and the honeydew stuff and making sure the kids were getting where they needed to be. I was filling up that canteen as tippity top as I could. But anyway, I'll do an episode on it and talk about some follies I made and maybe have her on. My wife is, and she is a no BSer. I mean, she will rail me on my own show. So I absolutely should have her on. She would, yeah, she didn't put up with anything. But no, you're right. Like that should go in the book. Like like the back page, like the survival guide of, marriage,
Yeah.
hunting and marriage. Yeah.
Oh man, dude, hilarious, brother! This has been a phenomenal episode. I could obviously keep this going. We're gonna have to bring you back as a guest another time to catch up
Yep.
on all the new stories and new adventures. Look forward to connecting with you at Western Hunt Expo this year. I'm imagining I'll see you there.
Yep.
But brother, thank you for sharing your stories. Thanks for
Yeah.
connecting,
Of
dude. You're a part of Soul
course.
Seekers Nation now. Let's go.
Love it. Dude, I love it.
You
Thank
get
you.
you get to pass on that mentorship as conservation mission, and once again, bro, you're the best. First generation bow hunter. I'm with you. Let's do it
Okay.
together.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Remember that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, and that you can never outgive good. As mentorship is conservation, just like when we need to be the change we want to see in the world. Remember to be an advocate for hunting because you already are, and to voice it, not be afraid. Go speak out and speak up. Proposition 127 in Colorado is a domino setting up to knock all the western states down. as far as hunting rights and the actual definition of what trophy hunting is. So make sure that you are aware of that. You're educating yourself, because the First Amendment is the very first on the Bill of Rights. Your ability to speak and how you articulate and how you carry yourself and what you speak for. You have the power to either speak life or speak death. And remember that you always want to speak life. Be blessed. I hope you enjoyed this episode. For Adam Buchanan, a First Generation Bowhunter, I'm Johnny Mack. Be blessed, freedom on, and as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.